Welcome back to Iron Archer Outdoors, guys. So we're gonna do a little peep swap on my Hoyt AX2. Two reasons. Um, if you kind of have a tendency of, especially when you're drawn back, you get set into your peep, and you seem like as you're pulling through, you tend to feel like your sight housing is kind of wandering in your peep a little bit. Um, this isn't a key roll by any means, but it's easier to see it, in my opinion, because we'll put it like this. If you got two holes lined up like this, right, and if you got a bigger hole, it's easier, if I'm not going to say it's easier, but if you get a little bit offset, it's not nearly as noticeable. But you get them closer together, not closer together, but you get them more equal size. When you start getting that little variance left or right, it's definitely a lot easier. Okay, so if I'm like this and I get a little bit off center, you're barely going to notice it, but that's definitely going to impact your left and right hits. And I have a tendency to notice that. I mean, it happens to everybody, but I do notice that off center a little bit at certain times where I'm kind of going through the shot, and at the last second or some little fraction of a second, I just happen to notice that, and the shot breaks. Okay. And it's just kind of in that little peripheral where I just happen to see it, and I'm like, boom, shot breaks, right? But this isn't a cure-all, but it'll help minimize that distance, or that little variation of being off center, where it's going to be easier to see it sooner. So what we're going to do is, right now I'm shooting a 5/32 Hamskia Raptor peep. I love these peeps. Yeah, they're a little on the heavier side. Everybody's so extravagant about feet per second. But feet per second don't mean anything if you can't hit what you're shooting at. That's the moral of the story. Okay. But I'm going to switch it to an 1/8 inch peep. So I'm going to show you kind of how I do it, and to kind of get it back to as close to possible as where it is, especially if your setup is dialed in really good, which I'm pretty confident on my sight tapes and stuff, and it's been shooting really good. My anchor feels good where I like it. I usually set my anchors. I get a good sight, a sight tape that's really close, and then I'll set my anchor point. And I set my anchor points, and this is like, kind of my crossover bow. It's a hunting / 3D / tack, whatever. Okay, so basically, I set my peep sights 40 to 50, generally more towards a little more around 50 yards. The reason being is, if you get a really comfortable anchor at 20 yards, okay, the farther you start to shoot, we're going to say 80, 90, 100 yards, so on and so forth, your anchor is going to drift down a little bit to keep your peep housing lined up with your scope housing. Okay, and the farther you're dropping down, obviously you're farther away from your anchor. And I've seen some people, they're way off their face to even get it to line up. And it gets really tough, especially if you're shooting a back tension shot, to maintain that, pin in the center of that peep. Okay, so that's why I like to run my peep sight a little bit higher in the string, so I get a comfortable anchor at like that mid distance, that 40, 50s. Okay. But we tend to shoot a fair amount of shoots that we're stretching well over 100 yards. So I like to set my anchor in like that 50 range. Seems like a good happy medium for me. Okay. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. But now if you're literally shooting 60 yards and in, for most times, a lot of people, that's all they do. They just, they bow hunt, they shoot their local 3Ds, which is, someone might get poked out a little bit farther, at some of the local 3D shoots. But the general average 3D shoots, we're going to say 20, 25 to like 40, 50. So it's not that big of a deal. You're just fine with setting a comfortable anchor at 20 yards. And let's be honest, what's the distance? Probably 80% of whitetails are shot at, or even elk, even for that matter too, inside 50 yards. Okay, so And whitetails especially, 20, 30 yards. It's probably 90% of the whitetail shot, if I was to guess. Okay. So that doesn't not a big of a deal. So, but when you're kind of doing a crossover and you're shooting, you have a tendency, and even if you like to shoot long range in your yard, if you're able to with a room, you know, to be able to shoot 80, 100 yards, it's a really good practice, and it's a lot better practice if you can keep a little bit better anchor point to do it. So I'm gonna kind of walk you through this, how I do it, keep my peep in the same spot so I don't got to worry about everything moving, and how I tie my peep in, which, hold that note, I should probably get some thread over here, so I got some. So normally I use BCY 3D, the orange. I got orange strings on this bow, so I like the orange. But I think I might do, because I got some BCY 3D in black as well. So I might do a black and orange. Spice it up a little bit. You know what I mean? But yeah, so we're going to get to this. I'm going to start off this. I'm going to tilt it down a little bit. So first we want to start off by, first we got to cut this loose, okay? So if you ever seen any of the Bomar videos, how he ties his in, I don't know where this all started or how anything, who came up with this tie or whatever, but I first seen it on Bomar's. I'm not claiming it's his tie, but so I tied it in his way. I love this tie. It is rock solid, and that thing does not move, okay? So once you make sure your peep is where you want it before you put this in, because once you put this tie in here, that thing is rock solid, okay? So, obviously I got my bow in the press because we're going to have to remove the peep. But these ties, they're a little finicky to undo because there's a lot of knots in here, okay? But with a razor blade, use a sharp one. Don't use a half dull one, okay? So what you're going to do is, I still got a lot of tension on the string. I just got the bow in here just enough to hold it, okay? But you're going to start, lay your blade flat, like the edge right here, flat on the string, okay? That way this cutting edge isn't going to dig in, okay? And what you want to do, probably hard because I can't zoom in with the front part of this camera, but is you're just going to start and you're just going to trim the edges of these knots off. So the cool part about this knot though is most of the overlaps in these knots sit on the outside, so keep that in mind. But don't go digging into it because you ain't going to see it if you hit the string inside there. And what'll happen is then you can just start kind of peeling away all these little knots, basically. So that's, you just kind of see how those come off, and then you just peel those little dudes off. Okay, this is kind of a little more time-consuming part of this, so I'm going to try to kind of go through this a little bit quicker. Obviously, because I don't have to show you how to cut every little knot off, but just take your time, especially if you're kind of doing this the first couple times or something. And if you don't feel comfortable doing this part, don't be shy to just go ask somebody at a local shop to do it. Because the last thing you want to do is cut your string and have your bow blow up in your kitchen. I've personally not had that happen, but I'm sure it's been done. And I don't really want to know how it turned out. So just take your time, and this is where a sharp blade is very crucial, because you don't have to push on it hard. When you start having to push on it, that's when you run into problems, and you're going to have more risk of cutting that string, and that is a bad deal, especially if they're brand new strings. Okay, because I don't think warranty is going to do very well if you got a brand new string. But yeah, I cut my string with a razor blade. So what I'm going to do is this is still pretty tight in here, but I'm going to get this first couple a little bit off. And these things are tight. So I'll probably cut this top a little bit. It might help me a little bit. And try not to scratch your peep sight, because that's going to leave little grooves on the grooves on the side of the peep. So if you're setting up like a setup tie where you're just going to put it in, then you're kind of just going to go out and mess with it and adjust it. And if you need to slide it up or down the string a little bit, those little grooves that you potentially cut into the side of the peep on there aren't going to scratch your string. And so it's something to kind of watch. And also, too, another reason it's good to have a really good sharp little blade is because this BCY 3D it's pretty tough stuff. So that's kind of another reason. And I've done this with dull blades, and it is kind of a pain. So, and you'll know, it'll be pretty obvious when you start going at this stuff with a dull blade. It kind of sucks. So once I start to get some of these peeled away, you gotta just get your fingernail on there, and this one I might have to go a little bit more. Kind of try to get as many of those off as I can. Just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so I think I got enough at this point where I can kind of show you the next little point of this before it wants to move. So what I like to do is right at this on the side, you got a top and a bottom of your peep. Is I put a little black dot right at the base of it on both sides. That way it's easier to center. Okay. A lot of times you'll just put a little spot right in the center of the peep on the string there, and you'll tie over it. But once you kind of get a tie over it, it's a little bit harder to see it. But once I kind of got most of these cut open, I can take a little more pressure off the string. And the reason I left pressure on the string is because you don't want to do this with your string loose. At least I don't like to do it, because you have a better chance of cutting your string. But I think I'm at a point now where I can take a little bit of pressure off the string. Make sure everything's good on my press first. Take some pressure off the string. Now, don't lose the center. Like, don't just go pop your peep sight out. And then, depending on your string, you might lose layers, which is not good. Or, not layers, but technically they're strands. But in a cable terminology, they're also called lays. So if you're into construction, you're essentially dealing with a fiber rope. Not a wire rope like a crane, but there's a difference between a cable and a wire rope. If anybody says there's not, they are wrong. But that's kind of defeats the purpose here, because it's not a wire rope and it has nothing to do with a crane. So, but at this point I could pop this peep out and just keep a finger in between here. But this is a VEC 99 string by Unbound Archery, so these strands like to stick together pretty good, so it's not like some 452 strings where you kind of lose it and all of a sudden they're like, oh my god, there's a bunch of strands all unravel and all loose again. Then you're fighting to find center again. But these strands stick together pretty good, so actually I'm going to leave that one. That'll help me keep center for the time being. So, onto the peep sight, the new one. Try not to drop it. I'm going to set this dude aside because I'm going to show you something. A little tip on these Raptor peeps is there's different grooves. I don't know if you can read it, but on here it's got a 35 degree and a 40 degree groove. So these side grooves that go in the string right there, they're angled different. And the reason that is to give you a chart over your draw length ranges where the best angle for that peep is going to be, how it sits in your string this way. Okay, so for me, I'm running a 28-inch draw length at a bow length of axle to axle. This is a 29.5, and I am right on the green yet, so I'm in the 40 degree groove. So I am right here. right on top of my finger. Right there. Okay? So, what does that mean? So if you see the pictures below, one side has grooves on it right here. And that's your 40 degree. That's the ones you want these marks perpendicular with your string. Okay? But I should double check that because, yep, yeah, green is 40. Okay. So, now if you look at the peep sight, they're not as abrupt as in the picture, but horizontally, you can see those little notches on the side. Okay? You want those running this way with the string, perpendicular. Okay? So now, I'm going to flip it so I got my peep in there right, which I want to do it this way, right there. Now, I can drop this in. Nope, I still got it backwards. I do this all the time. I gotta flip it. There we go. Okay, so now I got the peep in there. I can get this little piece out of here. I'm gonna back. So now you can kind of, I don't know if you can see it, but you can kind of see my marks that I had before. Maybe not, probably not, but I had my little Sharpie marks there. And I'm gonna back the pressure out a little bit. Get some more tension back on the string, get this other little piece off of here. Okay, so that's off. Okay, so now I'm gonna give it pretty much most of the pressure back, just before it's not gonna fall out. Obviously, make sure all your strings and stuff are still in the grooves. That wouldn't be a fun day, would it? Okay, now what you're gonna do, you're gonna take some of this out. You're probably gonna need 2 pieces about 15 inches long. Okay, you're not gonna use all of it, obviously, but you want enough so you got grip with your hands when you're pulling these knots. Okay, so one strand. I'll come over to the black. If you use a little extra, that's totally fine. You know, a lot of times, first time doing this, don't run yourself short because you won't be able to get your knots tight. It's totally fine. Okay, so here's the first thing. What I like to do is you come in here. If you're familiar with any kind of knots, you're going to do a double overhand knot. Okay, you just take one line over the other. And you go under once, under twice. Okay, so I get that on the peep. Then keep my tails of my knot kind of as even as I can get them. That's going to want to kind of walk back and forth. Get in the groove of the peep. Put that on there. Then what I like to do is I rotate that one underneath. That one will be there first. Then make sure your peep's still in a pretty good spot where you like it. Obviously you can still change this a little bit later on, but cinch that down good. It's not going to stay super tight yet. Then I take my other one, go underneath, same thing, double overhand knot, 1, 2. Then this old dude, way off, it's going to sit right on top. Okay. Then you cinch that one down good and tight. Cinch them both down good and tight. Now here's the Here's the kind of tricky part. Not really tricky, but so obviously you can see my peep sight's this way. Okay, going that way. Okay, so my D loop is right here on top of my string, on this side, the top side of my string. Your top piece is going to go to the bottom. Okay, so in this case, my orange. So you're going to come underneath and up through, and then just take your tail back through your loop. Then you're just going to hold your peep. You're going to cinch that knot up until it pops back up into that groove. Okay, then pull it tight. Double check your little marks. And I usually do like 3 of these just to kind of lock it in. Give a little wiggle, get it good and tight. It's 2, 3. Okay. Now you take your one string that's on the bottom side of your peep, under here, which is my black. Now I'm going to come to the top side of the peep and come over the top and through the loop. Does it really matter if you go over the top or underneath, whether it's on the top or the bottom? No, but as I go down the string farther, I will show you why. So, and it's not a big deal if you don't run your ties out very long, because it's never going to interfere with your peep, but potentially if you get far enough down the string in the front, if you're running your ties going, basically your ties are going to either go up or they're going to go down. But if you run them far enough down this way and they curve up over, they could potentially interfere with your sight through your peep. Okay? So, it's just something to keep in mind. It's kind of a little bit more of an OCD thing, in my opinion, but it is what it is. But if you're working on your own stuff, there's a good chance you're probably somewhat a little bit OCD anyway, because you want things done a certain way. And or you just like to do it in general, just so you know how to do it, which is absolutely awesome. And I wish more people would. Just because it just builds you a more confident booster on how things work on your bow, and you start to understand more things. Be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Especially if you're tuning your own bow, like paper tuning, and from the ground up, brand new bow, or not even a brand new bow, but just a bare bow in general, setting it up with a sight, rest, the whole 9 yards, paper tuning it, broadhead tuning, all that stuff. And you really actually understand how much time it takes to tune a bow. You'll start to gain a little bit more respect for some of the shops, because it is time consuming. So now I went around and I did 3 ties on each side, on each leg. So I got 4 legs here, okay? So now it's locked in pretty dang good. It ain't going to go anywhere. So now I can just finish mine off. I usually do 6 or 8 legs on both. You don't really have to do, I mean, there's not really a secret number, but you want to have enough that obviously it's not going to come loose or less chance of moving. But if you make these little half hitches tight, they're not going to move. So that's 7, 8. You just give them a little twist and a yank. They tighten up pretty good. So that's 4, 5. And you want to pull them good and tight too, because then these half hitches kind of all sit nicely together, and you'll kind of see how they start to curve on the string. And if they're not curving, making a nice curve, then they're not seating properly, because a knot is going to overlay the last knot. So it's kind of another part of that, where it's pretty easy to tell when they're tight and when they're not, because it's going to look weird. So that should be 5, 6, 7,
8. Now on the bottom one, coming underneath, we started at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so now our peep is tied in, it's locked in, she ain't going nowhere. Now what you want to do is you're going to burn your ends. Okay, tilt your string up a little bit. Okay, just use one finger, don't get it super close. Come down about 3/16, 1/8 inch away, burn your tail off, just melt it down. Just like that. Obviously you can cut them. You can just go like this and just come up here about 1/8 inch away, cut it. Cut it. And cut it. Then you can kind of do it one more handed. Burn it. Burn it. Burn it. And that is how you swap a peep without cutting your string and how to tie it back in. So, hope it helps you out. Good luck.